Louisiana Department of Education presents the Accountability Commission meeting held on February 17, 2017.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for being here. We will start with roll call.
Mr. Anders. Dr. Burns.
Here.
Ms. Carlson.
Here.
Mr. Carter. Ms. Gazzola.
Here.
Dr. Joseph.
Here.
Mr. Landry.
Here.
Here.
I was going to ask for you.
Mr. Langley.
Here.
Ms. Moe. Ms. Noel.
Here.
Ms. Nealon.
Here.
Ms. Price.
Here.
Ms. Shum.
Here.
Ms. Vale.
Here.
Ms. Wall. And Ms. West.
Here. Thank you. Before we get started today, I wanted to come to you with a few comments. We met yesterday with Superintendent's Advisory Council, and I had the opportunity at that meeting to provide an update on your work. And as I was providing that update on our work, I realized that I probably had not opened up a recent meeting to thank you for some of the work you've done. So I really wanted to take just a second to comment on what we have been able to accomplish up until today's meeting. And then I actually have spoken just for a second to Jessica about that, some of those next steps that maybe just we've not had a sit down and to hear some of the next steps with. But again, I think I centered some of my attention yesterday about around three main points. Basically, what I felt were some of the driving structures of your work. First of all, just to acknowledge that anytime we spoke about recommendations, that we were speaking it through the vantage structure of what proficiency would look like for our students in the future. Knowing that that mark of where we wanted to head was going to be a mark that whenever they graduated from our schools, they would be out there being able to compete and to really feel some confirmation that they were at a point of being able to go the next step in whatever that journey looked like for them. In my district, we have a mission statement where it ends with that we celebrate their graduation in order for them to be able to go to whatever they are dreaming about. And I really believe that this commission has kept that in the heart of conversations. The second thing I really wanted to say was that not only did we come here with a passion in the heart for the work that we've done, but we also came here in a very strategic way, a very focused way, and we did it through the eyes of data structure. That anytime we moved ahead in a recommendations piece, we asked for certain things to look at. We sat, we studied. I know we had study time even on our own individually, looking through what we had asked Jessica to bring to us. So anytime I am involved with a group that becomes that strategic and that focused and that passionate about the work, I feel like it's something that we need to recognize amongst us, ourselves as a committee. And then the third thing I wanted to point out yesterday was that the idea of that we as a commission understood our work. We understood that we were advisors to Bessie. We understood that when we moved into recommendations, that we were moving into recommendations with a belief structure And then we understood that our job was to allow the policymakers to work with that belief recommendation that we put out in front of them. So I want to sit here today as chairperson of this group to thank you for that hard work, to really commend you for what you've been able to do. I don't know if you've recognized this, but we've worked alongside each other for 9 months now. And so I just needed to take some time out to share out a good thank you to you, a great thank you to you. And then I'd also like to, I think we've done it individually, but as a group, really want to thank Jessica and Jill for some hard work. And I know that we put out a lot of demands, and we put it out on short notice, and they seem to always come through for us. So good job on that as well. Let's move on. You have the minutes in front of you, and I'm looking for a motion to approve these minutes.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second for the approval of minutes. Is there any disagreement on that? Okay, so moved, then we'll move forward. Today we're considering the high school growth index rate. We asked specifically to see certain things before we actually moved into the recommendation on this. I did want Jessica, though, either before, during, after, somewhere there, to frame up basically where we're headed with this work for after today, and pretty much some of that same work. I think information was given out yesterday. So when I heard it, I said, I think that we need to hear it as well as a commission. So I've asked her to kind of put that into this presentation as well. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Great. Again, just echo all of the many thanks for many, many months that I'm sure have felt like a breeze that have gone by. I appreciate that. Quickly for context here, the decision we're going to talk through today, as you all know, is pretty specific. And I think one of the smallest ranges of decisions we've had to make. Most of the options are pretty similar. There are pros and cons to each. We should talk through those, but I feel good about the direction you gave us at the last meeting to make a decision today. As a point of background before we just jump right into that, as Kathy mentioned, we have been talking through the challenges that you all have put forward, I think, very strong recommendations on for years. The idea of an A doesn't represent nationally competitive. Progress should be an index. It should include all kids. It should be worth more. And that we should be using our system to measure more well-rounded parts of school. I feel fired up about all three of those, as well as some of the adjustments that ESSA allows us to make. For example, including students with students who take our Law 1 assessment, who earn a diploma for their IEP team to be recognized. There's details in here also that are really positive from your work and from the flexibilities under ESSA that I think all represent really positive step forwards for our school, and I think put strong recommendations in front of Bessie for their consideration in the coming months. As a point of process, we released an updated framework a couple of weeks ago. I sent that to you all. You have seen that, I hope. It includes changes from last time based on your recommendations and meetings across the state. We will release later this month the sort of bureaucratic version of the Fed's template that you submit. We will do continued engagement ongoing, honestly, but in depth over the next couple of months. And there is a special Bessie meeting on March 29th where they will talk through ESSA and the submission date of April for us to begin starting the clock on the Feds. There was some discussion yesterday about, well, if we want to make adjustments or that kind of thing. Nothing about that April date boxes us in. Basically what it does is start the clock on the Feds, that they have 120 days to give us a yes or no. So by submitting in April, we can still have conversations. The legislature could still weigh in and say change this or that or the other. Bessie could do the same thing. Stakeholder groups that are here elsewhere could give us ideas to make adjustments. That's always been practice. We've always had adjustments to our federal plan. But we feel deeply committed to the idea that principals and teachers should start the school year with clarity about how they're going to be measured. And so we are moving forward with that. The one point I would make is, and I think this was a good suggestion that came out of yesterday, in addition to literally the hundreds of meetings, road shows, presentations that have happened over the past 9 months, I will be transitioning after our conversation today on this high school growth weight to more in-depth conversations in smaller group settings, both with superintendents, and I'm hoping to do the same thing with principals. Debbie has graciously given her time to Jill and I want to make sure we're getting in front of principals to really go in depth. I think there's a general understanding in the field about the overall shifts, but there's something more detailed about specific points and specific mechanics, and so we want to make sure everyone is hearing that, everyone's reacting to that, helping us figure out if there are gaps, there are adjustments that need to be made, and so we'll be doing that throughout the month of March as well, prior to that submission. With that, I will just jump right into the weeds, if that's all right with you all. Oh, I will also mention I'll be sending around a survey at Kathy's prompting to figure out additional dates as we need them. As you all know, as our ELL assessment gets implemented next year, we'll need to figure out how to put specifics around the weighting for ELL growth. That won't take place for a couple of years, but we want to bring you real-time data on that. As we collect data on the Interest and Opportunities Index, we want to have an ongoing dialogue there. And if other, positions come up that we need to revisit, I just want to make sure we have some dates in case we need them on the calendar. So just as usual, be on the lookout for that survey from me for work moving forward. Let's jump in. I'm not going to tell you what to do as a commission. I'm going to skip that one. That's for the benefit of the audience. As Kathy mentioned, I think y'all done an incredible job of making decisions that are about fairness to our system, but first and foremost, high expectations for all of our kids. And it's really been a pleasure. So I think that is a good frame for going into our incredibly specific decision today, and I've just really appreciated that. I'll talk through the timeline, I'll skip it. All right, so for high school, the decision before you today is essentially what do you want the weight of high school growth to be in the overall high school formula. As a point of historical context, right now, in high schools, EOC status, meaning whatever I straight up achieve, is 25% of the score. We have those 4 quadrants. There's pretty deep understanding in the field about those. There's a simplicity to the graphic. There's a lot of good that's come from that. In our original framework that we put out way back in August or September, we said, okay, let's use that EOC index to be the place that we recognize growth to a greater degree in high school, and let's make the full 25% EOC growth. What we heard back from high school principals over and over again, y'all heard this and I did, was that they wanted EOC growth, but also EOC status. So that's what you all put forward a recommendation on last time. We should recognize both in equal balance in the formula. Then the question becomes, how do you do that? The recommendation we brought last time was that, again, EOC should maintain as 25% of the formula as they are now, and you should just make that half status, half growth. There were 2 modifications of that folks wanted to look at, and you see those here as options 2 and 3. Option 2 is a small modification of option 1, where EOCs overall become 30% of the score rather than 25% of the score. So it's half growth, half status, that equals 15% status, 15% growth, a small nudge there. And option 3 is a bigger change, although still not a massive change. These are pretty similar along the margins, as you could see in the data, where it says every index would be 20%. So if we want to include more growth to have it be more aligned with 3 to 8, where you've recommended growth at 25%, option 3 gets you the closest to that with a growth weight of 20%. But it also keeps status at 20% and sort of redistributes it, as rather than 4 quadrants, it would be 5 sections of equal weight of 20% there. We included on this slide a similar version to what Jill pulled together for the 3 to 8 to show you what happens at the various weightings. So if option 1 is a 12.5% weight, option 2 is a 15% weight, option 3 is a 20% weight, what occurs. And as I've mentioned to many of you individually, we kept the numbers for the other indices the same So unlike the elementary and middle school, these aren't like a school plugged in, but we did that because in high schools where you're measuring 4 things, you would see up and down that sometimes was about the EOC being different, but sometimes was just about the school being different. And so we wanted to try to level that out. So we kept all of the other indices the same and then showed you what happens when a school is high on status, low on growth, low on status, high on growth, high on both, low on both, generally. And you see that represented here for your consideration. Finally, in the slides that follow, we show you what happens to the distribution of schools, and there's no curve on these, so keep in mind you all recommended a curve for at least 2 years. But what happens against the mocked up standards for the different years when you introduce growth at various weights. I think perhaps most helpful is the 2016 standards. Debbie had pointed out the helpfulness of this. You can see what happens to overall results when you make growth half of the 25, half of the 30, or 20% overall. And again, there are differences. They're not extremely large, but there are differences between the two. I would say the biggest change comes between options 1 and 3, and that's largely because I'm probably stating the obvious. You go from the formula, in option 3, rather than the formula being half graduation and half assessment, option 3 has it be 40% graduation, 60% assessment. There are pros and cons to that, but that's the more significant difference between the options. So, at the risk of this feeling very brief, that's essentially the question. And the data sort of speak for themselves. You all have seen versions of this before. It feels a little concise, but I'll stop there and see what questions, reactions you all have. I can refer to
Jessica,
Yes.
when you're doing status for EOC, are you including all 6 tests in the status, but only in the growth? It would be
Yes.
the ELA and the math? Or?
Yes, that's correct. All 6 tests, including U.S. history and biology, are in the status half of the EOC, and then growth is ELA and math, so it'll include 4 of the 6. That's a good question. Thank you for saying that.
And can I ask on the growth, is the growth from what you discussed from 8th grade?
Correct.
And just in looking at these, what is this? This is incorporating, if I go back to, well, let's, at that 2018, the slide on page 11. So does that include all of the other factors?
It does.
The graduation factor being 90%?
It's not all the way to 90,
No,
but the starting to stair step toward that. Correct.
Page, I think 37.
From last.
Yes.
Yep, that's right.
From page 37 in the last slide? Not 37.
The slide that showed an example of how you could do
Yes.
part of the way and then smaller drops after that, yeah. We use that just to, we can adjust those point values downfield. You all have given us a direction to work with there.
Okay.
But the 2025 is all in. So if you go to slide 13.
Slide 27. Slide 27 in last month.
Yeah.
I mean, the February 8th.
Whenever that was, yes, I'm with you. The slide that shows you all in on the standards
It's right here.
is slide 13. But keep in mind, this is 8 years out, so it's a little bit, that's not real.
But even if we do 2018, if I'm looking at that correctly, we're going to go from 33% A's to 6% A's. And
But you would have a curve.
You'd have a curve. No, but I'm just saying, that's what the formula,
Correct.
if you don't curve, just looking at that, because I'm looking at like a grading scale, I still think we have a question to answer, and why is it that this formula it keeps the F's pretty much at the same, but it drastically decreases the A's?
Because that's where you're reestablishing your bar. The entire conversation for you at this point has been, what does it take to get an A in Louisiana? And we are, for Bessie's directive, headed to a clear place of A should represent essentially nationally competitive. And so, if you're going to go about halfway there to what the nationally competitive standard is while you have the safety net of the curve, that's what you see play out here. specifics of the points and stuff, we can look at different iterations of those. But in general, the recommendation of this committee was we should go some portion of the way in with the safety net of the curve, have planned 2 additional smaller adjustments downfield, but before those smaller adjustments are ever taking effect for Kathy's directive, y'all will reconvene in 1920, fall of 19, I think, to look at the results from those 2 years and see if further adjustments are needed there.
Any other discussion?
I have one other just point, and this is just from the information that was shared yesterday, and I think is on the web link. Going back to the dropout index, it shows that what was presented yesterday at the superintendent's advisory said 6 or more credits. What was in our presentation was 7. Is it 6 or 7 for the?
It's 6 credits.
It's 6. But in the presentation last week, it still showed 7.
Jill, can you check on that? It might be a typo, but it should be 6.
No, right, I mean, I knew that, right, I'm talking about,
Yeah,
what
it should
credits?
be 6. That's fully
If
the
you
intent.
take a look on page 23
Of last month's, I mean,
Yes.
last meeting?
of last week, it says under credits earned 7 or more, it says,
Yeah, but that's for the A+. The
That's
A
for
bar should be
150.
6, and that's what you see play out.
That's for 150 points, Debbie.
right, it's 150 all the way up, but here's what I guess I'm saying, is people are confusing that when they see it, thinking that to get to the A, you have to have 7.
Yeah, Jill, we should make sure in
Yeah.
these presentations, when we go and discuss with superintendents and principals, let's color code the A cut differently, just to force people in to see where that scale's starting. It's a good point.
I just want to make sure people are clear on that, because somebody
Yeah.
asked me that yesterday.
That's
I
good.
said I thought it was 6, but in this presentation, it looks like it's 7.
Well, we'll make that adjustment. Definitely a good suggestion.
Okay. I'll wait on somebody else before I say something else.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and I've voiced this concern pretty much every meeting. I still think there is something off in the formula if we have to curve 68% of the elementary school grades, because, and I'm gonna just say the things that have to be still worked out. You know, when you talk about evaluation of principals and teachers, it's not based on the letter grade, it's based on the cut score. So even if you curve their letter grades, then you're gonna say, I grew minus points, and how is that going to be worked out? I agree, that's one of those weedy details that we need to have, but it's also the piece about before we go full-fledged forward with a formula that people are very uncomfortable about and are not clear on, those are some of the things to me that need to be worked out. So I'm going to suggest that there's a second thing that we can look at, and that is that everybody recognizes that bonus points are not where they want to be. It's not something that's helpful, it's not, because it changes from year to year, and that the growth factor is something that could be very helpful, especially if you know specifically when you get your test scores, here's student A, and this is what they need to grow to get to mastery, right? That is going to be the most helpful information districts and principals and teachers can have. So I would like to suggest that what we consider recommending is a move to go forth with the 25%, well, with the recommended growth factors that are going to be recommended for the formula, but that we do not push the change in formula points, because when I voted for that process last week, I said that you, Jessica, I think said that we would have time to tweak those numbers. I'm very uncomfortable with us not being able to look at all of the details of tweaking the numbers, and that we need time to say, well, what if in the past when we moved from approaching basic not being a score to basic, we only moved one level, right? We took away the basic points, the approaching basic, and gave points to basic. And this time we're going to be taking points away in what's recommended from both basic and from mastery. And I've asked a couple of times for us to look at a formula that changes those point totals.
Which I'm committed to doing.
And I guess what I'm saying is that to buy and give everybody a year to see exactly how growth affects, that to me the recommendation from this commission should be that we only move forward with the growth for the year 2017-18. We know we're moving to mastery in 2025, but to shift those numbers in that following year, so you get a real picture of what is growth going to do to my formula, and also in between. Yes.
Let me interrupt you for just a second, respectfully, but we have voted on the growth structure, and we've also made our recommendation on the curving for 2 years in order to reconvene after those 2 years. We're not going back there today. But what I need your discussion to be on this agenda item.
And it applies to this agenda item too, because
But
it's still
I've
the
heard
same issue.
basic, and I've heard the terminology basic and points. And when you look at what we're talking about today, we're really trying to hone in on the EOC section of the high school formula and determining how much status and how much growth we need there. Now what I think where we're going to head, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, but after we get this recommendation under hand, as you've already said, Jessica's going to be polling you, she's going to be surveying you, and she's going to be out in the regions, and we specifically have spoken about you, Debbie, helping us in those principal structures, so that this kind of discussion that you're talking about can be brought up to Jessica and her team, to where when they go to Bessie, and they start looking for specific numbers to put alongside these achievement levels, that discussion you're having right now can be the vital piece that they need. Am I correct?
And I understand that, but what I'm suggesting is that if we want to have something that rolls out better than Common Core did, and with people buying into what we are, then we need to have people on board before the formula
We are
changes.
committed to that.
But not if the recommendation goes forth as is, because the recommendation does not include those changes.
The recommendation that goes forth from us to Bessie is that we believe in growth. You just said it's probably going to end up being something that we've never had before, that teachers want, parents desire, kids want, leaders want. We're going to move ahead to where as soon as you get results, you're automatically also getting the target for growth. Not in my lifetime have we ever had that, but I think that's a key piece here. And then step 2, if we're not on target on meeting that mastery target, then step 2, we still have the opportunity to compare those students who don't meet that target to their peers. That's a 2-step growth model that we believe in, and that belief structure is what's rolling out to Bessie.
Right.
And then on top of that, as I said yesterday, and I've said before, we've said it here, we had options. We put them all out in front of us. Number 1, roll it all in, don't curve. Number 2, gradually, over every year possibly, make a shift. The problem with that, as we discussed, was that every time we make that happen, every year is a change. Every year, which is hard to plan, and it's hard to target structures like that. So we compromised, and we compromised with points of transition, but for 2 years, to allow what you're just talking about just now, to allow the understanding and the development and the conversations to occur, to let that happen so that we can come back and look at that data. And I'm with you on everything you said.
Right, respectfully, I understand that piece, but I'm saying we never were given the option of looking just at growth, because that's going to be a big change in the formula, and then looking at still moving to mastery, because even the growth score is going to be growth to mastery, right? Isn't growth? So I'm saying, why can't we have another option? I'm not saying go back. Can an option be that we say we go with the formula, whatever comes out for the recommendations on growth, because that solves the issue of bonus points, and then take 1 year and we can work through all these little finite details before we come up with the point scale that's going to be there for moving to mastery. Because
we're not going to determine the point scale of going there unless Bessie asks us to.
and I understand, but there's not a, we are determining a point scale, because that's what this, yes it does, it's in this presentation. How many points?
we're talking about this presentation versus growth at something else.
No, high school score. We're talking about high school score. We are determining that the points for basic and mastery will be 100 or 70 or 60 or 50.
That's not what this is about.
No, I mean, that's part of what's reflected in this. Is that not correct? Isn't that score reflected in what we see?
For 18, 22, and 25, it shows
Right.
you the current version iteration of points. The thing that you all have directed in your recommendations that you see part of SC and that my team is using to guide the work we're doing is that we should go modestly in, keep the curve, and 2 changes after that. We're going to get out on the road and go talk through all the specifics of that with superintendents, with principals, with BESI members, with you all. If we need to make small adjustments on like 5,000 decision points of point values over the next 8 years, we can do that, and we can make tweaks over and over again. So these slides are not gospel in the sense that we can definitely make adjustments here. What you all gave us clarity on that I think was needed and had been out in the ether for a long time was what Kathy said. Do you rip the Band-Aid off and curve? Do you go gradual with no safety net? I think y'all gave a strong recommendation, which is not what people were saying before the last meeting, which is a middle ground. Raise and go. But that's not the question on the agenda today, and y'all have already made a motion on this to move forward. But I want you to have full faith. I am going to be having this conversation in the nitty-gritty over and over and over again in any meeting you want me to be in with whomever you want me to have that conversation to make sure we get it right. But I feel like I have a strong direction about general value statement about how you do it from this committee, which allows us to go do the wonkiness of 5,000 cuts in 57 different iterations. If the data on 18, 22, and 25 is more frustrating than it is helpful, I apologize. We just tried to show you in a version of a gradual timeline what would happen. But you're right, they could be tweaked and they could look a little bit different. The bottom line is, if BESI follows your recommendation of raise the bar but keep the curve, what you really see here, and I think this was your suggestion, perhaps the most helpful slide is 2016. This shows you if nothing else had changed, but we had made EOCs half status and half growth at various weights, what happens? And the direction I still most need from you all is what's on the agenda today, which is, do you want growth to be that 25% slice in half? Do you want it to be 30? Or do you want to make a more fundamental shift in the formula to be the 5 even weights of 20? And if y'all can give us a recommendation on that today, we're ready to roll and start working through all of that.
And Debbie, before we get to you, do want to point out that at the last meeting, we did recommend that the EOC, I'm going to call piece of the pie, had both status and growth in it. And so what you did at the end of last meeting is that you came forth with 3 options, and which was understood to be our agenda item today. So, Debbie?
Well, I'm going to make a statement in all respect to the chair. I do not have real confidence in a lot of the decisions that we have made, and I know that it's democracy wins, majority wins. And I didn't vote with the prevailing vote on the last vote. So, what I am afraid of is that we here sitting on this committee, some of us may feel compelled to go before BESI and say, we don't agree. There are problems. This needs to be looked at even further. I find that if we're going to go to BESI, we really as a committee need to be pretty much in consensus. I don't see that happening. I don't feel it happening. I didn't vote on the last
Debbie,
vote.
you actually did. You did vote in favor of it at the last meeting. You
No,
voted in favor of
So
this.
can it be reconsidered?
Option 3 is not on the agenda, and y'all can vote it today. You've already voted on this issue. The thing I would say is, look, we want to get this right, which is why we've spent 4 years having this conversation, 9 months in these meetings, and literally hours upon hours, both facilitating these meetings, in stakeholder roadshows, and in one-on-one conversations with y'all and hundreds of educators across the state. No one wants to get this right more than me. I have spent literally almost every waking hour of my life for months and months and months to try to get this right. If you have an issue with the specifics on this, I want to know that, and I want to work through it. But this commission has voted on this issue. And it is a democracy, and the majority, including UW, did say you wanted to go with option 3. If after thinking about it some more, you want to look at some more options, totally open to that. I will meet with you. I will facilitate whatever meetings. I will get into whatever leads you'd like. Either way, I just want to emphasize again, because there was concern about this with Stoops yesterday, and I just want to cut through it. Moving forward with the plan and getting out there and training and educating doesn't mean things can't change. We can always change policies. We are fully committed to that. I will make a tweak anytime there's a legitimate issue, as will Bessie. They do this all the time, and they do an exceptional job of it. I'm looking at Shan. They do a great job on this. They are very responsive to stakeholders, and they want to end up with a good plan. I have full faith, as I do, as y'all do. But we need to make this decision today that's on the agenda so that I can move forward and start to do that work on your behalf and my own to make sure we get all the pieces of this right.
Okay, so comments on agenda item 4? Any further? Kelly?
So I'm going to ask that you all bear with the comments that I would like to make before I make a recommendation.
On agenda item
on the
4.
agenda item. We did meet, the superintendents did meet on yesterday, and they have expressed some grave concerns about this entire process and also about the agenda item that's up for discussion today. They are concerned about the ESSA framework, that there wasn't enough time to truly vet the entire framework, because there are some items that are listed in the framework that this commission has not had the opportunity to discuss. For example, the subgroups. How will subgroups be graded? Will they receive a letter grade? And how will that impact the school performance scores? They're concerned about the points awarded for basic and for mastery. They have concerns about that. They're concerned that basic will be worth 50 points, which is an F. And then you'll have mastery at 100, which is an A, and 150 for advanced, which is an A+. There's nothing in between the F and the A. It's like a big, sharp drop. They have concerns about that.
Basically, 50
Can I-
is D. 50 is a D.
50 is a D? Well, still,
I
it's
just
a
wanted-
50. It's low.
I just wanted to.
Okay. They have concerns about the transition timeline. They don't feel like it's so gradual. The first year, you're going to drop by 30 points. There's concern about that. There's concern about the submission of the plan in April. There are 30 other states that are waiting until September to submit their ESSA plan to the Fed. And now, you know, there are changes at the federal level, so we don't know if they will even accept an ESSA plan. So that's an issue as well. And yesterday, it was said, well, you know, if you submit it in September, you won't get the accountability information until February. Okay. There isn't anything that getting that information in February will not change what's taking place in the classrooms every day. Our teachers will still be pushing toward mastery for our students. Our students will still be learning. It's the same thing we did when the state gave us our test results in December. We weren't able to make good quality instructional decisions with testing results when we got it back in December. So what difference does it make if we get the accountability set up in February? It will have no impact on what will take place in the classroom. So why don't we wait until September to get this thing right? You're submitting a plan that 5%, which you're now calling interest and opportunities, which are leading indicators. I have questions about why the name change and what are the implications with that. You don't even know until you won't have that instilled until 2020. So you're submitting a plan that is incomplete. There is really no true consensus from this commission about the growth. If you recall at the last meeting, it was the chair who had to split, who had to make the decision to break the tie. So I have concerns about the thoughts about growth. In the December meeting, if you all recall, on the agenda, they asked us to consider the mastery, the formula where mastery is the new basic. But we made a recommendation, a substitute motion, that said we will look at simulations. We did not recommend or make the recommendation to say we will move forward with mastery being the new whatever. We did not move forward with that. With this item, no information has been given regarding the English 1 test. You're switching the EOC from English 3 to English 1, right? But has there been a field test for English 1? Has the teachers been given any information about that test? What's going on with that? So you want to change the test from English 3 to English 1 with no support or no guidance around that. So the superintendents feel like we need more detailed discussions about all of this information. In particular, with this one, we really don't agree that we should move forward with this consideration of the high school growth index weight until we're given further information.
I want to comment first on this. I do want to remind the commission of your role. Your role is to advise Bessie. We are not policymakers, we are advisors. We have committed to providing our recommendations to Bessie in a timely fashion to where they can make the policy structure and the decisions on timelines and when they would make their submission of the ESSA plan. That's not up to us. That's not our job. So I want to make sure that we are clear on that. I also would like to state that in terms of us not knowing where we were headed with this particular agenda item, it was very clear in our minutes that we voted to have status or have status and growth in this. That's not the question today. The question is not about whether we're going to do it. The question is what are we going to weight that split? So I just want us to continue to remember our role. And each of us play a different role outside of this commission. So we all come to the table with different backgrounds, different people we're representing, all of that. So what we have to do is stay true to our mission and our work as we're here are here today with us. So any further discussion? I think, Judy, you had your hand up.
You said it. I was going to say what you said.
Okay. Carol?
Okay, it's my understanding we're here looking at percents for models, and the rest can still be tweaked, right? That we're just trying to get a percentage that we feel is correct for growth, right? Because that's the only real change to 3 to 8 and high school.
That's correct.
So we still have time to tweak with the curve and things like that. It's the percentage and the model that we're recommending, right, to best. I just want to make sure
You are correct.
I'm correct. Okay.
Very good. Okay, Debbie Shaw.
So I'm going to go to page 3 of this slide that talks about what does the Accountability Commission do. And it says very clearly that we have made recommendations on a wide range of pressing issues, such as the district accountability formula and the rating system, policies for transition to higher academic standards or expectations, and revisions to Louisiana's teacher evaluation
That's
system.
correct.
And
every one of those was made at the request of Bessie.
And what I'm saying is, my understanding that the Accountability Commission was going to be the major group that was going to vet the ESSA plans. That's what Superintendent White has repeatedly said. And so I'm saying you've had all the meetings across the state. You're now hearing from stakeholders who are in the trenches, people who are superintendents, people who are principals, that there are still concerns. And what I'm saying is, we did some hard work here of trying to figure out where we were on growth, and I'm really okay with us going forward with that part of the recommendation to see. But when we are going to recommend that Bessie adopted and that we say to everybody in this state, we're going to curve our elementary school grades 68%, which is where that recommendation is right now. I think that we are making a severe, incorrect recommendation, because nobody is going to understand that I was at 100 points last year and this year I'm at 79 and I'm still an A, but my points dropped. And I think two things need to be, and we've talked about this before, and it talks about the star rating system or the letter grade accountability system. We are in a process of changing what we are looking at, and if we were to simply take one factor at a time, which would be the growth factor, and see what that does, that doesn't change Bessie's standard of saying we're going to get to mastery in 2025. But what it does do is allow for more dialogue about the intricacies of what's going to happen before the law gets made. So I have to go with what Debbie said. It's going to cause us to go to Bessie, and we're not going to feel like we have a completed plan or that we've really vetted completely the issues that surround the ESSA guidelines. And why would we not want to do that?
Respectfully again, I must get back to the agenda item, and then I'm going to also go ahead right now. We have put forth, I think, large debate, large discussions on what you are mentioning right now. As a matter of fact, growth was in our last meeting again. So I just want to share out, and Jessica, I don't know if I'm opening you up to something you can't do, but just let me know. I think that there should be a call to each commission member after today's meeting to see if there's any, quote, loose end. I'm just going to go ahead and call it that, loose end. That if we feel that, or she feels that after talking to each of you that you have a collection of loose ends, then I think we could also be polling out there for a meeting to have this kind of discussion. If we're not going to be satisfied with moving forward with the regional structure that Jessica's already shared out, then I'm going to go ahead and ask as chair that she do a personal visit to each of you about what you consider to be loose ends. And then we can, if needed, after that call, summarize for me whatever we hear, and we will move forward with a meeting date that all of us have been able to agree. Okay? Is that a fair place to be at the moment? Is that a fair place to be at the moment?
Right. That we would potentially have another meeting based on
quote, what you all are referring to as possible loose ends. Yes, ma'am.
So our recommendation that we voted in was the percentages, right? We're not
Correct.
recommending the set curve. That was just an example laid out.
The recommendation you all put forward essentially tells
to give us 2
raise
years.
the bar some portion of the way,
Right.
up the curve for
Right.
2 years. Placeholder 2 additional points to get there. But after that's a first answer on a long-term plan. After 2 years, y'all will revisit, and if any adjustments
Yes.
need to be made, you make adjustments.
Yes, and again, that was where we felt was a fair compromise at the moment of where we were and what we had discussed, Carol. Okay. Bridget.
Although I appreciate Jessica taking the time to reach out to the individual commission members, if we're going to discuss loose ends, I think a public meeting is the appropriate place to do it.
That's what I just said.
Today is what I'm suggesting, because there's obviously a lot of questions or concerns that need to be addressed before we take this vote. For example, my loose end, and I'm speaking as someone who voted against the proposal last time, we have 2 years of hold harmless again, even though the legislature and stakeholders last year agreed with people sitting on this commission with me to not request any hold harmless or any further delays and accountability for at least 3 years. I think this breaches a very important agreement that was struck across the street. If we come back and revisit in 2 years, nothing ever goes down. You're going to be looking at going up, and that's going to create 2 more years of hold harmless. I think we need an honest conversation about if we ever going to see a non-curve, non-hold harmless accountability plan in place. That's my loose end, and I think that's important, and I think some of that conversation should take place before we are forced to vote on a model.
Well, I have a loose end too, but I want to make a motion that we not take our vote today and that we wait until all the questions have been answered. We poll the group to find out an acceptable date to have that meeting, and at that meeting we can consider taking that vote.
Okay, I just need to clarify, are we upset with the points for growth or at the percentages?
I think there are just too many questions.
Okay, so.
I know
But to me, we're
there's
voting
a great deal of,
percentages, and then we can
I'm
meet
not
again for
hearing
the
any
points.
discussion yet.
there's just too many questions.
On the high school presentation that we just saw. I've not heard discussion on
I have a
12
motion on
point.
the floor.
Debbie, but before you put that discussion, that motion out there to shift this discussion, we haven't had the discussion about the agenda item yet. So if you, the concern I have, here's the concern I have. You're about to move a motion to shut down this agenda item when we haven't had a discussion on this agenda item.
I think that we need to have the vote after everybody is clear on what we're doing. We can have the discussion, but the vote needs to be taken after everyone is clear on what they don't understand.
So
And
Debbie,
I have
what
no-
can I be clearer about in this decision? Because last week, we've been talking about this weight for 9 months. In the last meeting, I brought a proposal that was modified based on feedback from the meeting prior. You all specifically said these were the 3 options you wanted to see. We then laid these out. We've modeled them. I've talked through through with almost every single one of you. And I hear you on the additional decisions. We can make those, we can discuss those. They're not on the agenda today, but we can have it. But I want to make sure, out of respect for principals, teachers, and SUPs who I need to go talk with and give answers to, I want your recommendation on this. Because otherwise that leaves me in a position of saying, here's a department answer and the Accountability Commission chose not to have an opinion about high school weights, when in reality I think you all do have opinions about it.
Well,
So on this, I would like to understand where the commission is for the purposes moving forward. And if there are other decisions we need to talk through, let's talk through them. As I've said, we've been doing this work for years. We'll keep doing it.
The high school
But
weight that we're talking.
I need direction here.
The high school weight today is, I respect the conversation so far, has nothing to do with what I've heard so far. The high school status, the high school weight is what we have come and convened for today. And I would like to, I personally, in order to make my decision, if I need to, I need to hear this discussion about high school status and high school growth on EOC. Okay? And I know you put a motion here, but I don't think the motion I don't feel like the motion is about.
My motion was not to take a vote today.
Was about it, but we haven't had our discussion yet. So I think it's only fair to discuss this item. I don't think it's about this agenda.
Okay, well, I will withdraw the motion. We can have the discussion, but I will make the motion again.
Debbie, I just don't think that the motion has much to do with the agenda item. That's where I'm at.
We need another meeting.
Okay, do we have discussion on this agenda item as presented, 12.5 versus 15 versus 20? Carol?
I have a few concerns about option C. Looking at the low grad rate and then going to a 75 at the end with option C's growth, that kind of worries me. Yes, because at the high school you're talking growth in 4 subjects. You got
Yes.
algebra, geometry, English 1, English 2. So you're measuring growth on half the kids. And I just have a hard time seeing us going quite that high at the very beginning when you're not measuring all kids. So I prefer option A or B, and Jessica, you were right, I shouldn't even brought B up. The numbers are exactly the same. I have no problem with us going down to one of those 2 to vote with 3. I just worry that not graduating kids, then you can have that much growth and still not graduate, and we say that's a good high school. So I'm a little leery of the 20% in option C, but okay with A and B, especially with the work keys and the ACT portion.
So either A or B is what you're saying?
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm leaning more towards A again now with the growth only being on a limited number of kids in 4 courses.
Yeah, that was
At
a
the
good
high school.
reminder.
High schools, we offer a lot of courses, but we're only going to measure growth on 4 of those courses.
That was a good reminder to us that the growth piece here is only the measurement of 4 EOCs in the
Right.
course test. G.
Gee, in looking at them, I also was looking at A and B with the preference toward A. And I had questions when I was taking a look at what would occur for 2022 and 2018. It seemed that when we went with the 20%, we really saw a decrease in the number of A's that you would have. And
Yeah,
I didn't know what
most
the
high
reaction
schools-
was
Yeah.
for K through 12 schools in looking at options.
Most schools, this is not universally true, there are some schools that are the other way, but most schools do better on graduation than they do on assessments. And so when you see that graduation rate go, weighting, I should say not weighting go down, you're seeing the assessments count more.
And I found A and B to be very similar as far as, what would be occurring, and it just seemed that with A, it was a little bit cleaner with the 25, 25, 25, 25.
That they're more comfortable with.
Yes, sir.
My preference would be A as well, looking at the options here, based on the decisions that we have to make. A appears to be the better program. And let me just share with you, there are a lot of different ways to get to New Orleans. We can take the interstate, we can take Airline Highway, we can take Old Hammond. We're not going to agree on the way that we get there. But I like the idea of knowing that we can move forward in the future and tweak what we need to tweak as we move forward. There's no perfect plan. One does not exist, but knowing that we have the ability to go back and tweak it and make decisions as we move forward makes sense to me.
Any other comments on these options, Bridget?
I have a question, please, on slide 10. What accounted for the tripling in the A schools between the 2013 baseline and the 2016 actual?
A couple of things. One, we've seen historic growth on ACT year over year. 2, we've seen they basically have gone up on everything. Graduation rates are at an all-time high. Our AP growth is #1 in the country, as is the expansion of Jumpstart credentials, which increases all 3. And additionally, there was progress points were added in the interim between 2013 and now, and so you saw high schools getting recognition for at least some of their students making progress against that.
But even with option A, it would return to 6%, which is closer to the 11 under the 2018 standards, correct?
Sorry, which slide?
On slide 11?
Option A, yes, if you did not have the curve, given the, proxy adjustments to the points, you would end up at about 6% based on our simulations.
And that's moving to the 5 achievement levels where mastery is the mark for the A.
Part of the way there, it's not all the way in yet, but yes, starting to make that shift.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this agenda?
So, once again, I go back to, with the growth, you said it would be ELA and math, right? So it'll be English 1, English 2. English 1 will be the new EOC. Can you tell me what supports will the State Department give schools switching from English 3 EOC to English 1 EOC? There's been no field tests, no assessment guides, no guidance for teachers whatsoever in this area. But you want to put that in this accountability structure.
Yeah, so principals and teachers in high schools for years have asked for an English 1 exam. Honestly, it's a little bit bizarre to me that they started with 2 and 3. I'm not totally clear on why that happened. But the test would follow the standards as is required by state and federal law, as all of our other assessments do. And it will measure our standards. It will be scored against 5 levels. It will mirror the quality of our 3 to 8 exams, which have improved in quality over the past couple of years pretty dramatically. And throughout the spring and summer, we'll provide supports for teachers like we always have. We always put out assessment guides in the spring. We always do intensive trainings through the collaboratives in the summit. We have curricular supports for schools. We have teacher leaders who we train deeply and do trainings. But the reality is our English 1 teachers know the standards. They know what the 8th grade assessment looks like, and they assuredly know what the English 2 assessment looks like. They will get a measure that looks similar to those that measures their standards. And that will be provided all of the supports that we provide for all of our assessments throughout the spring and summer to support them.
Any more discussion?
I just, you know, I kind of think the part that, I think C is probably not where we need to go at this point, just because I think that that is not going to put, it's going to unbalance where we currently are. I don't see a whole lot of difference between A and B, you know, but the big concern I have, though, is still in where we are on those differences in percentages. I mean, here's what I see as the big issue, and I know that when we talk about, we didn't really discuss high school a whole lot. We only barely got into it in the last formula, and then there's other issues that are there that they're not reflected in this because this is just showing the piece of the growth. I think the growth is not the biggest piece. It's about whether we count 90% grad rate, whether we don't count a 17 on an ACT. None of those issues were able to be truly vetted in this discussion on high school. And I think that we need more vetting and looking at what we would be doing with those points and breakout, you know, because of a couple of reasons. You know, what Dr. Joseph brought up about, we're doing a new test in English. We're going to do all the high school scores are now going to a 5-point scale from a 4-point scale. All of those are going to bring differences that are going to affect where we are in that percentage. And I have to agree, it's the big dip, even in moving from letter where we are right now to that next year with any change in those percentages. And I mean, it's what I said at the last meeting. How can we look at a formula that requires us to have to curve 68% of scores and think that's the formula we should be recommending? And to me, that should be vetted before a final recommendation is made to VESA.
Do you have any more discussion on these options? I'm going to capture public comment. I usually yeah, I think that was, I didn't see. Yeah, if you are interested in public comment, could you go ahead and put your blue card in, please? Do we have? I'm not hearing any more discussion on these options. Do we have a recommendation here on which option we want to consider?
I'd like to consider option 1.
Okay, we have a motion to consider option 1. Do I have a second? I have a second. So there's a motion and a second on option 1. Before we go to that, I'd like to hear, you have discussion?
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we not vote today, because I think that we still have too many questions to begin the end of our work, and then this goes forth to Bessie, all of these recommendations that we have made. And we still don't understand, and that's voiced this at the beginning of the process. We are going to be making, and have made, so many changes to the formula. We don't understand how it's going to affect our schools. We really don't have a full, complete picture of how all of these changes are going to affect our schools. We got it in snippets for that change. But the whole set of changes, we have no idea how it's actually going to play out.
Do we have a second for Debbie's?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Before we move on any action on that substitute, I'd like to hear public comment, please. Our public comment will be 3 minutes per comment, please. And I have Mr. Donald Sanjay first from the Governor's Office. Thank you, Mr. Sanjay.
Thank you, and I'll repeat what you said at the beginning of the meeting. I want to commend all of you for the work that you do here. It's very important work. It affects what goes on in the classroom, and the decisions you make are very, very important. And I have special sympathy for the two of you at that desk because I've been in that seat before and I know how it is, but you know, I do appreciate the work that you're doing as well. I want to speak to the concept of growth in the school performance score. Now, when we say school performance score, we're measuring actual school performance. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples that are just oversimplified, but if we have two schools, one school, say, is all 8th graders, and they begin the year working at the 10th grade level. At the end of the year, they're still working at the 10th grade level, okay? Then let's look at their performance as compared to another school who's got all 8th graders, start off the year at the 5th grade level, and at the end of the year, they're up to the 7th grade level. And you're going to ask yourself, which school performed better? Now, when I say the school performed, that's the faculty, that's the teacher. Which ones performed better? That first school I mentioned got no growth in the students. They'll still have a high SPS the way we currently do it because their status is high. But I would suggest that that other school added more value to the students. They performed better because they did what they were supposed to do, is take the children walking into their school, walking at the door, and increase their knowledge, increase what they learned. Now, as far as the amount that it is, that's something that you know, we don't recommend anything specifically, but I just want to speak to the value of growth in a school performance score. You know, it's been said that, well, if you add growth, then you're going to hide or you're going to falsely say that a poor school is good. We might contend that by adding growth in, you'll actually reveal how good that school really is, because what they're really doing with the children that knock on their door at the beginning of the year and come in. So we would want to validate that growth is a very important thing. To the extent that you want to do it, I mean, that's going to be your decision to make. But it is a very, very valid part of the school performance score. And on another item, if you would indulge me getting off of the agenda just a little bit, we just want to make a comment in general about raising the bar. And again, like I said, it's off the agenda, but if you would indulge me, you know, the metaphor. As a former track coach, you know, raising the bar, your metaphor is actually about a high jumper that jumps, okay? And the bar is set right here. We teach the people how to do that.
You can finish.
If we want the bar way up here, we don't raise it all the way up there fast. I mean, it's a gradual increase. And I say that because, you know, as a superintendent, if I have a school that was an A last year, the students actually performed better. They had a higher ACT, they had all their scores were better, but because of the fact that we changed the rules, they dropped from an A to a B. It's very hard to explain that to parents, to the public. They see that school as declining, even though I think they're doing better. But that's just a point.
Thank you, Mr. Son. Dr. Patty Glasser from Kenner Discovery.
Hello, everyone. I was here last week also. Thank you again for your hard work. I do appreciate how difficult it is. I'm Patty Glazer from Kenner Discovery. We're an open enrollment charter school in Jefferson Parish, Type 1, pre-K through 9th grade. We're adding 1 grade a year until we'll be pre-K through 12th. I'm in favor of option 1. We also have 15% SPED kids and 76% at risk, so we have our share of at-risk kids. A high growth rate moves everybody toward the middle, and as a school administrator, that may be a good thing. But as a parent, I do not think it's a good thing. You know, I said last week, and I'm going to say it again, so a child graduates and they've conquered their EOCs, and they go to a B or a C school, and perhaps they can't get the score they need on the ACT, which is the gatekeeper to colleges. Do we have to like the ACT? No, we don't. Can we recognize that it's a monopoly? Yes, we can, but it is the gatekeeper to colleges. So I would have a problem if we benefited from a high growth rate for a better score, but it didn't really reflect where kids are in the real world. You know, we don't give the Super Bowl trophy to the team that has the best growth rate. I just think we need to measure it more realistically. I think ACT needs to count for 25% as it does in option 1, and I support a lower rate.
Thank you. Erica, is it Connie?
I know.
Urban League?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica McConduit. I'm the president and CEO of the Urban League of Louisiana. Thank you again. I echo everyone to say thank you for the time and attention you've put into this process. Some of you, I've seen you in other places at the governor's advisory group as well. I'm just here to introduce a statement that a group of 9 organizations came together to work on over the course of several months and hours of work to come to consensus. Our groups are very different. Some of you guys have seen the letter that we have put together already. It essentially articulates our values. And our values, you know, like I said, we spent a lot of time intentionally trying to build consensus on between very, very different groups. As the Urban League, I'm a civil rights organization. We work on behalf of parents and students. ESSA is a civil rights legislation, right? It is an opportunity for us to get it right and deliver on the promise of a quality education for parents and students. And I just want to make sure that we continue to keep the focus there. This is our opportunity to focus on equity. We know that in order to get where we want to go as a state, we have to focus on closing the gaps that we know exist while simultaneously continuing to build on the excellence in terms of the trends that we see currently progressing. Both are equally important, but in doing that, we have to present honest pictures to parents to make informed decisions. As it relates to this matter of growth, I think growth is important. It is important for parents to see growth. It is important for them to know that a school actually can move their student. However, it should not come at a cost of presenting a false picture to a parent of some misinformation on how their child will actually perform, as we just heard, once they leave that school's doors. I think that we should be sophisticated enough as a state to develop a system of metrics, a dashboard, if you will, to show growth, to show all kinds of data that is important. Culture of the school, discipline of the school, student mobility. There are so many factors that I think go into making up a total school and a total child's experience that we should figure out how to, you know, show all of those metrics in a way that parents could see an accurate picture, a total and comprehensive picture of a school, and not just one that we create in order for them to, you know, in some ways benefit the school more than it does the parent. I think we have to also make sure that we double down on this matter of equity and focus in on subgroup data, right? We know that's where we have to put our attention. If, like we heard, that if we're going to raise the level of mastery, I do believe that we need to have the requisite supports in place for students and for administrators and for teachers to get our kids there. We have to have those supports in place. I do believe that I commend this committee for moving toward mastery, but it is equally important to double down to make sure that we lift all votes equally and provide the requisite supports for all of us to get there. And I just have to end by saying parents are critical components of this plan. They should not be overlooked. When we are figuring out the types of supports and the types of school improvement plans, parents are your #1 stakeholders, and their kids, they must be at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Smithers, New Schools for New Orleans.
Good afternoon, everybody. Echoing the thank yous that everybody has already put forward for the work that's been put in by Jessica, by the Accountability Commission, and making sure that we get this right for our system. To steal some of the words of Bruce, there is no perfect system. We are building a system that constantly changes. We are building a system that responds to children who, as we know, from day to day can go through many different changes. So I want to first say a specific thank you to Jessica and the team she's been working with on the transparency. On the LDOE website, there is a full page of resources that gets put up and updated regularly about the work that happens here, and it happens quick, and it gives us time to review and share with our partners, different funders who have questions about what the process is looking like. So we want to say thank you because you're allowing us to engage with our greater community and engage on critical levels within our organization. And then specifically to the high school growth, the high school index weight, we think option 1 is a fair first step. However, we believe in the future that option 3 will actually be more one that captures what the guiding beliefs of the overall commission wants to capture. As you said, Jessica, in the past, high school represents a body of work, and we think that option 3 represents that body of work, and it also underscores the work you're doing at the state level to realign our EOCs to represent those higher standards, to reflect a different sort of capstone for our high school students. Because what we've seen in our visits to classrooms and our works in schools, we've seen that in 9th and 10th grade, what happens is there is a lot of writing instruction, rigorous writing instruction. But what happens is, as students have to prepare for that ACT, what happens is that writing instruction declines because they're more focused on different technical aspects that those kids need to know so that they can get past that gatekeeper on the ACT. However, what we do know also is that there are other schools and universities that understand that high school is also a body of work. We're talking about great colleges like Bard, Sarah Lawrence, right? Who don't need the ACT or SAT for a student to be admitted. They have to just show their body of work. And that's why we think growth should be as equally as important weight as our other assessment metrics as well as graduation. Because we know that in our schools that serve our most disadvantaged populations, showing that work is sometimes really difficult because our students are battling against years and years of systemic inequity, and we're trying to just capture a little bit of that hard work that is going on in those schools. Those kids can reach those same levels, and those students will reach those same math 3 levels. It's going to look different than students with more opportunity, but we have to make space for those schools to show it so they can stay open and continue serving kids at an excellent level. Thank you.
Mr. Ben Markowitz.
Yes, thank you. I echo the thanks. I think this is really hard work and very frustrating work, and I appreciate you doing it on behalf of all of us. I've been moved by a number of comments that I've heard. I'm particularly moved by Ms. Conowit's comments because I very much want this system to effectively inform families, particularly those whose kids have struggled in school, to get ahead. And I want to agree that a school performance score based on status would effectively communicate that. But if it were true that a status-based SBS were truly, honestly informing families about how well their child could do in a school, we would not see such an overwhelming correlation between an A school and mostly affluent families and a D school and mostly impoverished families. If my child is behind and has been underserved, an A school in Louisiana is not currently offering me a solution, but a high growth school is. So again, I'm actually quite in favor, and particularly at the high school level, when the culture can so easily be, these kids came in behind, there's not much I can do, that we think long and hard about how high we can make growth in our formula to incentivize school leaders to do the right thing. I love the example of an 8th grader who ends at 8th grade versus somebody coming in multiple grade levels behind who ends at 7th grade. The first school is likely to do fine by affluent families. The second school is likely to do fine by families who have really struggled. And I like to fight for those families, and I hope you will too. I would end with a final question. You did some extraordinary consideration of a 25% growth formula for K-8 for elementary. I'd be curious as to why you don't consider that in the same way as high school. And I hope the answer isn't high school is just too complex, because then I would argue that high school should be simpler. And I hope it's not that high school is higher stakes, because then I would argue that elementary and middle school should be higher stakes as well.
Shannon Davis, representing Bessie. I too, again, am thankful for the commitment and the time commitment of the members of this group. I just wanted to provide some information because at a lot of the advisory council groups, this tends to come up. There's such pressure that comes forth with putting forth a recommendation. But I just want to remind you all that you were tasked with coming up with a rating system for schools. How that works, how that figures in to the logistics, the specifics, has to be adjusted in policy. And it has another level to be vetted after you all make your general recommendations. You're advising Bessie, but you're also advising the department as to where to start the work. If it changes beyond that point, that's fine. You will have your chance to make your comments. It will be vetted with the superintendents. It will be vetted with other groups. And you'll have an opportunity to weigh in. It will go through the APA process. Public hearings can be held. So regardless of what gets included in ESSA, the policy for schools still has a long way to go. So just keep that in mind. I know it's a lot of pressure, but you're just coming up with direction basically to start the work.
Okay, we're going to close public comment at this point, and we have a substitute motion on the floor to not vote on the motion for option 1, which is 12.5%, and we have a second on that. So is there any further discussion?
Yes. I want to go back to the fact we're just voting on the percentages. We're not voting on the growth to mastery component and how many points each one is going to be worth. We're philosophically deciding what percentage we want to attach to growth. And the rest still has room for work.
Debbie, and I would reiterate that we have no idea specifically how each of these changes in totality are going to affect our schools. And until we get a better picture of that, I really do think that we need to slow down and we need to get a fuller picture. And I don't know how we do that, Jessica, and I'm not trying to be critical of the work that you've done. It's just for me, and I think a number of people on the committee, and a number of people who are not on the committee. There are just so many questions that we don't feel positive and we don't feel confident in what has been done as a total picture.
Sure, and I appreciate that. This committee over the past 9 months has looked at more data, more in depth, with a thoroughness that I have literally ever seen an advisory committee ever do in the history of the commission generally, and with our work with Bessie, which I think is great. And I am eager to have in-depth discussions that build understanding. Some people, this stuff is more intuitive for them than it is for others. I want to have those conversations. I want my team to make those resources. I want to get out on the road and have small group and large group discussions where we go through the nitty-gritty of points for educators who most care about those points. But I have to say, if you choose as a committee today to not put forward an opinion on this, when, to be candid, my sense is there's a fair amount of agreement among these 3 options about what's a good first step. When I go out on the road, you are going to put me in a position of saying, the department's current answer on this is this, but the commission refused to put forward a value statement on this because of other ancillary issues or a full picture. It also limits my ability to have, for high schools, the full picture, put it together. We've done that for elementary schools. We've done it in painstaking detail, and I've shown it to you, a version of it in high schools using this. But if you all can't provide direction, at least in your opinion, among these 3 options about what lies best, you limit actually the ability to solve the very issue that you're putting on the table. And so I hear you. I want to solve it. I want to get in detail. But the most expedient and helpful route to do that, if that's really what the debate here is about today, is for you all to make a call and a recommendation about where you stand on these 3. And this is y'all's decision as a commission to do, but the most helpful route to solving the very problem you're articulating is to put forward a motion on this today.
I'd also like to just add to that is your delay in voting on this option does not delay the timeline. And, I, as a commission leader, would really like to be able to provide the input to this high school piece to be included in this timeline structure. So I also wanted to add that. Debbie?
So, to me, where the big concern is that we, at the last meeting, for one example, we were given the last slide about the English language learners and the test coming in, and we're now going to switch to 9th grade, and we have really not fully vetted all of the issues that there are for high school, because we did a very, very brief discussion. We had maybe a few slides on it last time. There was no real discussion about where we are. We never discussed grad rate piece. We never discussed ACT. So when we talk about this piece of the index rate, if I knew that this would be a component and we were going to have another meeting to discuss, as you said, all these loose ends, what Bridget brought up, what Dr. Joseph has brought up, what Debbie's brought up, what I've brought up, then I think the comfort level in voting on this would be a little bit better, because what the problem is according to what happened last week, when I voted, I thought I was voting so that we would get more feedback on those particular parts. You're saying that's going to come. So does that mean if I vote on this now, there will be no more discussion about what the high school index is going to be? This is going to go to Bessie, as this is what we have fully recommended, because that is the concern. And just
let me clarify that.
okay, let me just do one more, not on that piece, but on the English language learners, because I don't know that I made myself clear on that. We had one slide that said we're going to look at a test, but now we're talking about 9th grade English 1. So there's being an EOC. So are people going to be hit twice on that? I mean, we didn't really have any discussion on the English language learners. Are they going to get a double score on that piece? I don't want that answer right now. I'm just saying.
I don't need to answer that right now.
Okay.
I would clarify.
Okay.
The test that was talked about on the slide for ELL was the new English proficiency exam. Not English 1.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, if those students still have to take the English 1. They'll be in 9th grade. I'm saying, will they be counted?
If there are ELL students in the 9th grade taking the English 1 exam, as stated in the slide, there's a year of waiving them in their first year of English language preparatory.
Are their scores going to, both scores will count for us? And my other question is, why is
They don't now either. Can I just offer
No, they don't
clarification?
now, but
Can
we
I jump
didn't
in?
have a conversation on it.
Okay, if you're going to bring it up, let me
Okay.
answer. So as we talked about last time, and as has been practiced for years, when a recently arrived English language learner takes an English exam, they take it in year 1, so you have information, but the score doesn't count. We're arguing for going even a step further than that under ESSA, which says in addition to that 1 year, you can do a 3-year walk-in. Year 1, it doesn't count. Year 2, you just look at growth. Year 3, you count all 3. We worked with Mickey on this. We're working with ELL principals. We agree on that. As I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we're fully committed to meeting again. You all have given good overall values on this, but there are pieces to work out. You're right. We need to implement the new ELL assessment before I can come back to you and say, this is exactly how the growth looks on it. Because what I don't want you to have to do is say, on a made-up scale, on made-up points, generally, here's what we're going to do. What I'd rather do is say, here's the assessment, here's how it's scored, here's how our kids did in year 1. We think next year we should look at growth only. Here's how that would play out. And there's good stuff under ESSA that we can take advantage of what grade level is a kid in? Were they in formal schooling before they arrived or not? There's a lot of details on that. In particular on ELL, and in particular on the Interest and Opportunities Index as we get additional data. But on both of those, We have to do it under ESSA. We will do it under ESSA because it's the right thing for our school. Y'all have been clear on that. Stakeholders have been clear on that. We're totally on board, and I think Bessie is as well. But we need good data before you make that decision. And what I don't want to do is walk into this meeting and ask you to vote on that when we still have to do that first year of implementation. So on those issues, and I'm sure others as we get into the field, we'll have to come back. We will do that. We will always do that. But that doesn't prevent us from making a decision on this high school question today to add further clarity.
Also, Debbie, we started this meeting with an announcement that Jessica's going to be polling you for additional meeting dates. That went out in the very first part of this meeting.
Right, but the problem is that after this meeting, this is the recommendation that's going to Bessie, unless I misunderstood.
On this issue,
Percentage.
on the percentage for the EOC weights.
Okay, so clarify for me though, will there be a meeting before the March 29th recommendation that's going to happen?
That's what you do. Yes.
Yeah, that's why I'm sort of like,
But they told us
My
last week.
question is going to end with a question on process. First of all, what Erica McConduit said is the smartest thing I've ever heard in my 11 years on this commission. This is a broken system, in my opinion. This accountability system has to be much more comprehensive to give our stakeholders, and particularly our parents and legislators, a real look at what the work that the schools are doing all across the state. So, and that's something I remember saying 100 times even. Secondly, one of the things she said echoed something that Kelly said, and I want to underscore that as well, because I've said it many, many times. I believe in raising the bar because Louisiana is so far behind and our kids can do better. But we have to have the resources for our administrators and teachers to do the work. And that has not been the case in the last 5 years when we've been moving the cheese so much. So that's critical. So now, having said that, with regard to Debbie's motion, I would not speak in favor of the motion because, as I understand the process, and here's my question, if we don't adopt something today, there's nothing to stop Bessie from adopting something else. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I think I would feel better having this commission adopt something and come back to try to answer more of the questions. Because there are questions. Let's make that really clear. There are a lot in this pretzel we're folding ourselves into in accountability. There are lots of questions, lots of moving parts, and we do need more clarity on that. So, you know, I would speak in favor of moving forward.
Kelly, question. So why can't you all meet with superintendents, teachers, parents, get some information from them, and then come back to this commission with more options to choose from? Why can't that be something that we look at? Because right now we just have there were just three options given. You could have other options to look at. And then we meet and then discuss those other options. And I also have a question about, and I always go back to the leading indicators that you have not decided what they're going to be and won't be in the formula until 2020. Where will the 5% leading indicators be couched in the high school's weights?
Yeah, so as I've now said many, many times, the leading indicator, now interests and opportunities, placeholder, has been in grad rate. Y'all aren't committing to a recommendation on that. Bessie doesn't need to commit to a recommendation on that at all. We need to get the data. We need to run the models on it. You all need to put forward recommendations about how to thoughtfully scale that to be fair to rural versus urban, big versus small, well-financed versus not. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into that, and we need good data to do it. If when we do that, it makes more sense to put it in a different place than the placeholder I put in a graphic, by all means, let's put forward a recommendation that says, Bessie, it should be X%, it should be done in this way, and cut it from this other part of the formula. And y'all can definitely put forward a recommendation on that. Honestly, I could take it out of the graphic, but I wanted people to know this is something we're going to be working on, which is why I put it as a placeholder. On the first point about getting feedback, happy to do it, but I want to be clear. There is a version of this narrative that implies we haven't already gotten feedback. Let me be completely transparent. When we put out a framework in September, that was based on literally years of feedback from the field, from Bessie, from legislators, from principals, from superintendents, from teachers, from parent groups, about what should and shouldn't be in the system. And what we've heard overwhelmingly was you need to raise the bar because A isn't what it needs to be. Our kids can compete, let them. And 2, you need to fix progress. Part of that progress conversation was about in high schools, as in 3 to 8, progress was not a significant enough portion. It wasn't good as an add-on, it should be an index, and it should include all kids, which is why when we put out a recommendation in September, literally 6 months ago at this point, the first version of this in writing with detail was public, we said, make the EOC index about growth. I didn't just come up with that magically. We did that because literally for years, we've heard from people to do it. Then we heard, once we put that out, really healthy discussion. Our high school educators were super involved. It was great. They wanted to say, okay, well, if status matters for kids on EOCs, we want to keep that. Totally open to shifting it, totally open to thinking about how to do growth thoughtfully. Your idea on simple growth changed how we do that. I think it's great. This has been an iterative process, so I am more than happy to go have these meetings. We're going to do it anyway. And I'm more than happy to share back with you all what I hear in those meetings. And I can tell you right now, if there are good ideas and adjustments that come out of those meetings, you will see them in what's reflected in what I show you in this meeting, as has been the case for 9 months. So that has always been true. But I just don't want folks to take from this that this is like black box formula creation that's not responsive to the field, because quite literally, nothing could be further from the truth. So I am fully committed to meeting again. I am fully committed to do the regional meetings, as I've said now 100 times. And I will absolutely bring any adjustments to this based on the feedback from those. You're welcome to join them as well. But to not, again, just to reiterate, and then y'all should handle this how you want, to not make a decision on the now blank screen. Y'all are like, what are you pointing at? To not make a decision on this specific when the decisions are as similar as they are, and you all have weighed in multiple times as high school educators, I think would be a mistake for whatever it's worth.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion of not voting on the motion, and we have a second on that.
I just want to say that if we vote to go ahead and have this vote, and everything goes to Bessie, then it is signaling to Bessie that this commission is united, and I don't see us as united.
We've heard you on that. So we have a motion, a substitute motion. We have a motion, a second to that. Debbie Shum.
So I just want to say, can there not be a statement that we will have a meeting to discuss those other pieces?
I think that's where we're headed after we clear the table or where we are, because that's pretty much how we started this meeting. So
Well, you have a motion and a substitute.
But we got to clear this. We got to clear where we are before we can make next steps. All right. So I want to remind the commission that voting yes for this substitute would knock out your first motion of choosing option 1 on the weight structure for EOC. Okay. So all of those in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your hand. Okay. We have Debbie, and Kelly. So the substitute motion does not go through. So we're back to the original motion, which is option 1, 12.5%. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any more discussion on option 1? Vicki?
I think the growth is too low. That's my comment.
Okay. All right. Then those of you in favor of option 1, please raise your hand. Option 1, 12.5%.
Give Ryan a second.
Give Ryan a second with your hand up, please. I signal that as motion carries. So we are
And who's opposed to
recommending.
that?
Pardon? Oh, okay. We're carrying option 1 as our recommendation. Okay, now to our next steps, and I think this, Debbie, is where we can talk about the next meeting structure. So, in looking at your timeline, yes, ma'am.
I would like clear layout of exactly what these next meetings are going to allow us to do, because I still have problems with some of the things that we did vote on, point values, what happens when you fall from one level to the next. I still have lots and lots of questions about that, and would like to know if there's any way that we might be able to tweak or change some of those pieces. We've given you a framework, but the actual pieces within the framework, the point values, etc., I still have problems with those.
So I am planning to do sit-downs with, as we've been doing, but with groups of superintendents, groups of principals, and for anybody else in the audience, I'm happy to do a meeting if you'd like to just walk it through. I think what we should do in those meetings is pull together in one place all of the recommendations that are both in the ESSA broader document and specifically the recommendations of the Accountability Commission. And hopefully Kathy will join some of those as she can to talk through as a commission, here's what they're recommending, here's what you see reflected in the framework, here's where this goes from here, etc. I'm planning for those to happen in the coming weeks, and I'm more than happy whenever we reconvene to talk through updates from those as well. As Kathy mentioned, if there are particular issues that you'd like to revisit, that's helpful to talk about, but on issues where you put forward a recommendation, you know, the commission has put forward a recommendation, we need to then go share that with people to come back before I think it's fruitful to rediscuss the same issues that have been hashed through.
Could I ask, Jessica, and I'm sorry, could I ask that you give us, as you have done with high growth, low status, high status, low growth, low and both, on a total, the whole picture, every change?
Yeah, I think that's what you're hoping.
Debbie.
So one of the things that I would first like to make sure is that this meeting occurs before the final ESSA recommendation on March 29th, so that this can, whatever comes from this next meeting can be incorporated in what's going to be presented. And the second thing is there's two things I think that we have never clarified, and that is on the high school formula, I do not believe that we've discussed the grad rate and the transition to the grad rate, to the 90%, and the transition and the values for ACTs, because the use of work keys and ACT and us and people giving work keys so that we have more people taking work keys so that they can get the higher points, as opposed to getting a 17 on the ACT and having those points count. We never really vetted that conversation, and I don't know if that can be a side conversation. And then the second thing is, when we were given the options about the transition, we never had an option that said, let's just go ahead and implement growth for 1 year and talk about adding the points in future years. And I'd like to, in other words, keeping basic and mastery at the point level they are, but an option that should be discussed to me with people about, let's look at what growth does to the formula and to the points, specifically when we get the data back from this year, but where that goes. And then the second thing is to, and we've asked for this a couple of times, a balance of knowing when, for mastery, if we kept the 125 points, this is in both elementary and high school formula, if we kept the 125 points for mastery, but only shifted basic, because every other time that we've shifted, we only shifted one category. When we moved from basic to approaching basic, when we moved from approaching basic to basic, you got no points for approaching basic, but it didn't adjust the points you got for basic.
reporting scores and reporting information has come up in a lot of discussions. And I've heard Debbie Shum talk about the dashboard. I heard Erica speak about a dashboard. I'm just wondering if that would be something that as a commission we could look at, how all this information is reported to our parents and our schools, other than just looking at a grade, a letter grade, and an index. Because I think there are other factors that are important to parents and administrators and the public. So if we could take a look at a dashboard,
I agree,
like you have suggested and like Erica suggested, I think it would bring us together in some way.
Yeah, on that point, so this body is established to advise on the policies of the rules, but more than happy to work with you all, and I would love your feedback on that. Would love to work through that. So we should just figure out the commission. We should figure out how to structure that, but more than would love it. Love for y'all to engage on that. We try to improve those each year, but I'm sure there's other stuff we can do, and would love your take on that.
Yes. I would like to be able to attend some of those meetings that you are doing regionally. And I think it would be good if we all made an effort to go in the region where we live, because we need to hear what the public is saying. We need to hear if there's people really attending these meetings and are really caring about this. I find it interesting that in yesterday's superintendent's meeting, this was like brand new news that's been around for a long time. And you would think if anybody would have been aware of it, it would have been the superintendents. So I find, I can remember a couple. I know Mike Falk's been here a lot, and there's been maybe one or two others. But I don't know if we've had superintendents be in attendance in this audience, if this was of such a big concern over 9 months. And it just all of a sudden blew up yesterday at a superintendent's meeting. So I say we get ourselves out there. Let's listen and see what's being said by the public. I talk to my teachers that are coming in to meet with me on data analysis. I talk with the principals that come in and meet with me. And I keep them informed every time I go to a commission meeting. I let them, this is where we are now. What do you think? And it's funny, I find when I meet with the teachers, they are more open to what we're doing and more interested, really, than our administrators are. Somehow, they seem to get it because they're right there in the trenches. So that's my recommendation, that we be able to attend those meetings.
I have 2 quick comments. I think our hands are tied. I think with the transparency with parents that we keep hearing over and over again is because we're trying to mesh the growth and the status, and it's not painting a true picture. I really wish we could report them separately so the parents could see. Your school is doing great growing. They still haven't quite reached the bar yet, but they're on their way there. We keep trying to mesh it, and I think that's where the message is getting lost to the parents out there. We understand it, but I don't think the parents. If we could report it, right now we're tied by law, but if we could report it as 2 different letter grades, I really think that would help parents be transparent. And then the other issue of the curve. From what we're hearing from a lot of the parents, they don't think our formula is currently reflecting the schools as it is, so when we change it, I think we should see a big shift. If we're not seeing a big shift, then it's like we're keeping the model the same as it always has been. So I'm not quite as concerned running more numbers and looking at the growth to mastery part. I do agree a separate meeting needs to look at the details of that. But I do think we should prepare ourselves for some major shifts, because if it's not going to shift it, why are we doing it anyway? Okay, you know what I'm saying? So I hate that we're trying to cram a model into what the results we've already gotten in the past. That we should be prepared that it's going to look different. The percentages will be different for the first couple of years, and what do our teachers, principals, and schools always do? We rise to the occasion. And then we'll see those percentages go back up.
I have a couple of questions. First, can members of this Accountability Commission put items on the agenda?
Yes. Yes, it takes a unanimous vote from the commission to do that, yes.
Okay, so that's the process, because I did request that 2 items be placed on the agenda, and I was told that that was the requirement to get it put on the agenda.
Pardon me?
I wasn't told that that was the process that it took to get an item placed on the agenda when I requested 2 of my items be placed on the agenda.
Okay.
But neither here nor there. I also have a question. The information package that we received from Jessica and her team, and they do a phenomenal job putting all the information together. We don't get that information until a day before this meeting. And so that's a lot of information to process and to absorb and to come here and make and have good quality discussions about all of the information that's placed in front of us. So I'm going to ask that if we have another meeting, that we get the agenda and the documentation well in advance so we can vet it and we can come back with some good information. So to that point, we have a whole ESSA framework, right, that we have not gone through. We've only gone through a piece of it. So superintendents, I'm a superintendent, I'm here, and I absolutely do care about all of this and how it will impact the students in my school district. And so do all other superintendents. And so when they're in their meetings that we do have, we are discussing the ESSA framework. We're discussing everything in there, and we are aware. The issue is, just like in this commission, when we receive the package the day before, superintendents are also receiving information at the last minute and have to sit and try to, along with all of the other things superintendents have to do in their school system, have to sit and try to read through a 24-page dense document that's much thicker than the first one, go through all of this and try to determine how all of this is going to impact their schools. So I will say superintendents do care about their school systems. They're well aware of what's going on, and they're doing what they need to do to try to make an impact so that we can have a positive impact on our students.
So one thing is, on the charge of this commission is on accountability issues. The framework itself includes broader stuff beyond that, that's beyond the charge of this group. But on any of the accountability stuff, happy to go in depth. I do have to say though, Kelly, I agree with you. I think our superintendents want to get this right just like everybody else. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that that was thrown on superintendents the day before. And I have to say that just because I know my team and other teams have literally been working around the clock to get this out. Every single one of you got data on these high school models on Monday, with the exception of Debbie, where we accidentally didn't send it because of a scheduling issue. You've had it for 4 days. On a timeline that was a week-long turnaround, by the way, for models, that Jill worked around the weekend to get it done, to get it to you. And on the framework, that document has been out in the public for a week and a half before superintendents met yesterday. So and is reflective of the model that was out in September. So I want y'all to know, because I take pride in my work deeply, and having done the amount of work that we've done over the past 9 months, I am fully committed to transparency to you. I work around the clock to get this done. But to say that we're shoving this stuff on people last minute and that it's not clear is just wrong. So if you need things early, we'll get it to you. If you feel like you're not getting something, let me know. That's why I try to
get
get
packets the day before the meetings.
Okay, so I think I've done this several times, but I just have to keep pushing this, that our role is defined, and we have to stay within that definition. There are other routes to tend to some of the questions and comments and concerns that we're putting out in front of this commission. We're good with hearing those comments. We respect those comments. But in terms of action, you have to understand our role. Shan did a good job just then of reminding us of our role as a commission and what our role is in terms of that movement. So I have to, as leader of the commission, I have to keep bringing us back to that point. And I think that's where I have to end this too, is that we could sit here for the rest of the afternoon and we could continue this conversation. But when it's all over, when it's all said, and when we are at the point of adjournment, I would end with the same comments that I'm at this point. The ESSA framework is not intended for us to go through. It is not our role to go through it. there is only a portion of that framework that we're reviewing. And we'll review that, and we have reviewed that, and we'll continue to review that. But, you know, we have to stay true to that. That's our work. So where I'm at right now, Debbie, before I come to you, is that we're at next steps. You see the timeline in front of us. Jessica Zardi and myself, we're committing to another meeting. That meeting's going to come before March 29th. She's going to be surveying you. She's going to be out there working this. We're opening up the regional structure to you. Judy, we want you all at those meetings. If you can be at those meetings, we want you to hear those comments. We want you to be in the area where those comments are happening. Jessica's going to be trying to communicate that to us as soon as she gets those on the books. We don't have all those on the books yet. So if we did, they'd be right up here for you to see them on this timeline. I personally believe this is an active timeline. I don't think it's stagnant. I think we're adding dates as dates become available. Very active. So please do not, let's be just at this point open to the idea of another meeting, open to the idea of the action-oriented timeline in front of you, but again, respecting the role we're in. I'm asking that. That's where I'm at. So with that, I believe we're at the end of this agenda. And Debbie, if you have a comment to go along with that, we'll let you also take this to adjournment.
Okay, two questions. One is, will anything be presented at that March 7th, 8th Bessie meeting, actions, or is that planned only to be presented at that special meeting on March 29th?
They'll receive the minutes from the last two Accountability Commission meetings, but there's
no action.
No action.
No ESSA action.
Okay, and then the second thing is the agenda for the next meeting. Will the issues that we brought up, how will that be addressed in the agenda for the next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll work with Kathy on this, along with each of you.
Okay.
We should talk through it. I just think rather than here, we're not going to get
I hear.
Okay. We need to be strategic with that structure as well. Are you going to take us to adjournment with that? Debbie, you take us to adjournment?
Yes.
Okay.
I move.
And second there by Vicki. All right. Thank you all very much.
This has been a presentation of the Louisiana Department of Education, copyright 2017, all rights reserved. For more information or to contact the Louisiana Department of Education on the web, go to www.louisianabelieves.com or call 1-877-453-2721.